So the Knicks season is over. What went wrong? Who's to blame? What is next? It's all right now on a fresh edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Yes, welcome in. It is episode 12 of Gordon Damer on Sports, and so much to discuss in this episode. So much to get into, a very Knicks-centric edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. But before we get too deeply into it, you know what I'm going to say. Please hit that subscribe button, share the episode, like the episode. It does mean a whole lot. All right, obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about the Knicks in this episode for one simple reason. It's probably the last time we're going to have anything to talk about for the Knicks for a little while at least. It will be an interesting offseason, but obviously the Knicks season comes to a crashing halt in Indiana this weekend, Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll get into that game. What went wrong in the series, what lessons you can take out of this season, who's to blame, but most importantly of all of those things, what's next? That's the big question this offseason. We're going to talk with Kris Pursiainen, who is a national NBA reporter for Clutch Points and has been covering the Knicks playoff run. But where we start with the Knicks is at the end. The Knicks season is over, the ride is done, and it has been so much fun. And look, when your team's season ends, you are allowed a mourning period. I'm not going to take that from you. So if you need to cry it out, if you need to eat some bad pizza, if you got to doom scroll through TikTok, whatever your go-to coping mechanism is, live your truth, people. I'm not anyone to take that away from you. But I got to be honest with you, when it comes to the 5 stages of grief, I am already sitting pretty comfortably in acceptance. I didn't think that I would be at acceptance at this point. It's a little early for that. And maybe you're not there yet. Maybe you're still stuck in denial, right? If we did not lose to the Pacers again, not the Pacers. Or maybe you're in the bargaining area where if we didn't blow game 1, or if Tibbs had just given Landry Shamet some more minutes, the whole thing would be different. Or maybe you're in anger. I completely understand anger. That's where I spend a lot of my sports fandom, is in the anger stage of grief. And that looks like just fire Tibbs, yelling it from the rooftops. So I get it. That's fandom. And with Knicks fans, it's cranked up to 11. But eventually, you've got to land in the same place that I find myself in, and that is acceptance. Because as painful as it is to say, the Pacers were the better team. I know it hurts. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to admit it to anyone. You don't have to admit it to me right now. You can say it just privately in your own mind, but you know that it's true. At the end of the day, after 6 games, they were deeper, they were cleaner, they were coached better. And if you watched that series, you saw it. But look, by saying that, the Knicks were not outclassed in this series. They were not clowned in the series. Every game was competitive. Every loss, really, with maybe the exception of Game 6, there were moments where even when the Knicks were down, you felt like we're in this. And let's be real as well. If Aaron Nesmith doesn't have the greatest 3-minute shooting stretch I've ever seen in my life, we're probably getting ready for a Game 7 at the Garden, and people are getting ready to sell their organs on the black market for tickets. But that's how it goes with NBA playoff basketball. It can turn on the smallest of moments. So now, predictably, with Knicks fans, they're a loud bunch to begin with. There's a wide range of reactions, but it feels like a good portion are predictably melting down. You've got people shouting, even before the series was over, to fire Tibbs or get Josh Hart out of here, make this big move, that big move. I've actually read an article in the last 24 hours that suggested that the Knicks should pursue this offseason Ben Simmons. That was actually typed out and put on the internet. I've seen the name Kevin Durant get mentioned a time or two, and I will just tell you right now, no thank you. I think we're good there. Because it's easy to lose the real message here and the real key. And the key is the Knicks are really close. And this year is year 1 with this group. And it felt like this group was kind of thrown together on the fly a little bit. With the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein, the injury to Mitch, the move was made to get rid of Randall and to bring in Karl Anthony Towns. And it was an odd mixture of players. And at no point did it feel like that was the last piece to a championship roster. And it always kind of felt like a bit of an odd mix, and it never really seemed to gel. But again, this is year 1 with this group. And we'll get into what some of the moves that maybe the Knicks can look to a little later in this podcast. But just on the point of the season coming to an end, I understand, feel your feelings, mourn the season, scream into a throw pillow if you need to. But the good news is now is the time for Leon Rose to shine. And he has earned some level of trust. But I get it, each step up the mountain, it becomes tougher to navigate what are the right moves and the wrong moves because the big moves have probably already been made. So the Knicks are not there yet, but they're not that far away. So again, we'll get into the roster decisions coming up. But the first question involving the Knicks is one that I've talked about before, and that is the coaching question. What do you do with Tom Thibodeau? And I'm not going to get into all the reasons why I don't think that Tom Thibodeau is going anywhere. But the 3 reasons why you would fire a coach after making an appearance in the Eastern Conference Finals or a conference finals for the first time in the franchise's history in 25 years, there's 3 reasons to me. Number 1 would be the players just can't stand him and they want him out. He's holding the team back in some way from reaching their full potential. And specifically, the star player on that team hates the coach and wants a change. The NBA, clearly a star-driven league, and it's clear the amount of times that the star's not happy, it's much easier to change the coach and bring somebody else in than find a different star. So if that relationship is fractured or the players as a whole tune out the coach, that guy's gone. That is clearly not the case with the Knicks. From all the public comments of Jalen Brunson or other guys on the team, that is not the case with the Knicks. So that's not going to happen. Cross that one off the list. Number 2, I would say, hey, there's a clear coaching upgrade available. Now, I don't think that Tibbs is a great coach. I think that there are better coaches. Problem is, they're not available. Rick Carlisle, I think, is a better coach than Tom Thibodeau. I'm not really going out on a limb there, but he's currently got a team. Eric Spoelstra is a better coach than Tom Thibodeau. Again, Eric Spoelstra, not available. The one coach that gets continually mentioned by the Fire Tibbs crew is Mike Malone. And it's pretty clear to me the people yelling about Mike Malone don't know anything about Mike Malone other than he coached the Nuggets to an NBA championship. But if you talk to anybody who knows him at all, he's got a lot of the same traits as Tibbs. Usually when you change a coach, you want something different, a different personality, a different mindset. That would not be the case switching out Tibbs for Mike Malone. Now, is there a coach that's available that might be better than this group than Tibbs? Yeah, maybe, but it's not as easy to identify that guy. And if you get that wrong, there's a huge risk of backslide rather than moving forward. And to me, that is too great a risk when there's not some clear upgrade available. So cross that one off the list. So then the only other reason why a coaching change would happen would be that the owner, James Dolan, wakes up one day in a bad mood and says, you know what? Fire Tibbs. That's it. Because it's obvious the players don't want Tibbs gone. It's pretty obvious Leon Rose doesn't want to make that move. This is his guy. He hired him, and he has watched him do the job, rebuild this entire team's culture from the bottom up. And James Dolan has done his best work over the last 5 years by hiring Leon Rose and then staying out of the way. I don't see any reason to switch that up now. And all these years that he's owned the team, every fan has been screaming for Dolan to stay out of it, to cut the checks, find somebody who knows what they're doing, and get out of the way. I see no reason to switch that up now. So if Tibbs does get fired, it won't be because the players turned on him. It won't be because Leon Rose believes in somebody else to do the job. It'll be because James Dolan felt some way, and that's exactly why it shouldn't happen. If you're putting your basketball faith in James Dolan to fix that, you have not been paying attention to basically any part of Knicks history. All right, now on Gordon Damer on Sports, we're joined by Kris Pursiainen, who is a national NBA reporter for Clutch Points. He's been covering the Knicks during their playoff run. No one better to talk about it with it than Kris. Kris, thanks for popping on the podcast. I guess first things first, initial thoughts on, we're recording this on Sunday afternoon, initial thoughts on the Knicks ousted by the Pacers in 6.
Yeah, Gordon, first of all, thanks so much for having me. Always appreciate working with you, man. So awesome to be here on your show. Seriously, don't take it for granted. It's an honor to be able to talk outside the station, some hoops. I would say initial reaction to the loss last night was okay. Okay. And that means a lot of things. It's not It's not just me saying, okay, I literally see the score. Okay, the season's over. It's also, okay, that was 100 games of basketball. Um, that is a double-edged sword in and of itself. Yes, it's the first time the Knicks have played 100 games in a season in quite some while. But it's also 100 games of film. It's 100 games of data. It's 100 games of trends. It's 100 games of observations. It's 100 games of growth. Thibodeau will always say you either win or you learn, and that he prefers to do his learning from his winning, but you learn no matter what. I'll never forget this. And this is after that okay hit my head and thought there's a lot of film to look through, a lot of data, a lot of lineups. Um, I thought back to something that Tom Thibodeau said to the media last year. I covered game 7. I had just graduated college, and on a technicality, I was allowed to resume and continue my Knicks beat coverage for Fordham's radio station, despite no longer being a student at Fordham. My last paycheck of minimum wage had not come through yet, and so they could technically add more hours. Like, not that I wouldn't have done it unpaid, but like the school, So that technicality allowed me to cover game 7 about 4 days after my graduation. And I remember sitting in the press room after game 7 thinking, man, is it going to take me 5 or 6 or 10 years to make it back in here? But aside from that, man, as someone who's watched this team grow immensely, right? The first question I ever asked Tom Thibodeau was why he went with Derrick Rose as the first sub off the bench instead of Emmanuel Quickly, which I think did a good job of illustrating where Knick fans were at emotionally and mentally at the time with the team. And now I was listening to him talk about losing in the second round of the playoffs for the second year in a row. And he said 29 teams every year are theoretically unhappy. And, he didn't say, well, 6 of them were trying to lose as many games as they could anyway. No, he kept it simple. He said 29 teams are unhappy at the end of every season. And so you will go insane as a competitor unless you make sure that over the course of the season, you did everything you could to look back and say, yeah, we're one of the 29 that had their season end on a loss or end on a regular season win, but we did what we could. And I think this year the Knicks aren't able to say that to themselves. And so that was kind of my second reaction was I don't know that this group can say firmly after this season that they had everything in order to an extent that allowed them to optimize the talent on the roster. And so that's something else for the team to consider going into next year.
How much of the series itself, though, do you think you'll look back on game 6 and how that went down, or how much of it will be looking back on that game 1 and allowing that to get away?
It's funny, Gordon, because after game 4, a Knick loss, you couldn't help but think if they had just won game 4, the series would look much different. It would be tied. I saw it the opposite way. I thought game 2, splitting at the Garden, that's understandable. Splitting on the road with the loss on the road coming in Tyrese Halliburton having a perfect game, like a triple double with no turnovers, the only player in postseason history, I think, besides was he the only player in postseason history to have 30 points, 11 rebounds, 15 assists, and no turnovers? When you did the exact stats that he recorded, I don't think anyone else has ever done it. He was going to do that at home once this series. It came in game 4. Think about his performance in game 5 and how gone he was.
Yeah, he was a non-factor in game 5.
And
he really, even in game 6 last night for the first half, he was pretty much a non-factor too.
They did a nice job. And so as the fatigue wore down the Knicks, sure, Halliburton always able to capitalize on a split-second missed rotation. But to think, okay, you split at home, you split on the road. One of them was a Halliburton Jesus game, and the one you lost at home was a close one, tough fought. To me, game 1 is the bigger stinger, because if they had won game 1 by 2 points, right? If they had, instead of blowing a 14-point lead, they had blown a 12-point lead, but still led by 2. Well, okay, they win the game. Then it's 2-2 after 4. And what that sets up is a best of 3 series with 2 of 3 games at Madison Square Garden. And for me, when you have the clutch player of the year on your roster, that's an advantageous situation to be in. Um, Jalen Brunson showed that his heels have some weight, that he wasn't going to let Tyrese Halliburton eliminate him at home for a second straight year. He dug in and the Knicks performed and they delivered. Brunson and Towns, the first duo since O'Neal and Bryant to score 20 points or 25 points each in each of the first 5 games of a conference final. Um, Obviously, Jalen and Kat are not Shaq and Kobe because those guys won several championships. So that's unfair to everyone involved in that, all 4 of those names. But you did see proof that this Knicks core is getting somewhere in an Eastern Conference with no Jason Tatum next year. You have to watch out for the Cleveland Cavaliers. You have to watch out inherently for the Bucks and what they might be able to do if they keep Giannis one more year, or if he stays and wants to. Cleveland, Orlando, still Boston a little bit. You got to think, do they make a move? Is there something about the Celtics that makes them think, if we trade someone like Kristaps Porzingis for a Miles Bridges, and yes, we know that there's a million things that are going to be asked about that, but we get some power forward, small forward play. We move off an aging player. Like they could still be a contender. So you definitely look at this Knicks roster and you think, hey, Hart is 30. Everyone else is under 30. This is not your typical, hey, an NBA superstar's 34th birthday party celebration resulted in 3 longtime friends rediscovering their friendship and deciding they should team up and spend the last couple years of their career making a real run at it. Like, no, Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges, these guys are all 28 and 29 years old. And they're signed for several seasons. Everyone except Bridges is signed past next season. That's a core. That's objectively a core. And yes, they gave up a lot to get it, but they're in a world where the salary cap is more draconian than ever with regard to the second apron. And they decided to get the talent in the door first and work on the growth later instead of waiting forever for the perfect star to shake free. So I think they're on a good track.
All right, so when we talk about next year, Knick fans at this stage are still spiraling, I think, to a large degree about what changes you'll hear a lot of crazy things from Knick fans over the next couple of days. When we talk about the core, the two-headed monster of Brunson and Towns, do you think that that's workable given the limitations clearly that they have on the defensive end?
Yes, I do. But I do think that the Knicks didn't put themselves in the best situation to figure that out by the end of this season. I don't know if you agree with this takeaway, but one of my takeaways, particularly from the Indiana series, was that each of those 2 monsters, Brunson and Towns, were at their best most often when the other one was off the court. And I don't know if that's a defensive thing, if that's offensive fit, because we didn't have enough of a sample size with all those other lineups to really tell. But we could tell that they looked better when the other one wasn't there. And I think that signifies the extent to which someone like Mitchell Robinson is so important for the Knicks roster. I think it signifies the extent to which they need to be focused on, if they are planning to move Robinson, who has just one more year left on his deal for about $12 million, getting someone like Walker Kessler back from Utah. Because if you don't go into the season with a center that can protect the rim, you are going to get another 96 games of starting the same starting lineup, getting the same poor results, and nothing changing. It wasn't until Robinson came back that the Knicks even had some life breathed into them. And it took until game 97 to put him in the starting lineup, despite overwhelming mountains of evidence that the starting lineup they threw at the wall for 96 straight games was not going to stick. So I do think for next season, you owe it to Brunson and Towns, given what they accomplished, given Towns' 20-point fourth quarter against the Pacers, given his Mikal Bridges' performance against the Boston Celtics, given Jalen Brunson's performance consistently landing him in Michael Jordan sorted statistical anomaly production, like these ESPN graphics used to be like, oh, well, here's Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, LeBron James, and Thaddeus Young. If you sort by guys born when it was sunny out with no rain and they had 49% or better on a Thursday in the playoffs. And now it's like players who have scored 30 points and 5 assists in one game 10 times in a playoff run. And it's like just Jordan, LeBron, and Brunson. And you're like, oh, this guy is probably one of the 4 best players in the NBA. Like it's probably Jokic, Shea, Giannis, and Brunson at this point. That's just that's the point of playing the games. And it seems like when the games are played, those 4 guys just continually rise above. Now it's up to the Knicks. Make the most of it. You have this guy who's younger than 30. You need to go out there and make the most of him. I do think that Karl Anthony Towns is someone who can really swing a game. I thought he was the most volatile Knick this season with regard to looking like you don't know how he got on the court on one end and looking like you don't know how he hasn't won MVP yet on the other. But that is the nature of Towns. And so a center, whether it's Robinson being healthy for the start of the season instead of the first 50 games, he sat out this year, or it's a new center, whatever it is that they do, it has to be something that allows the team to give itself the best chance. I don't think they did that this year, playing about half of their regular season possessions with a lineup that consistently lost its minutes. And it showed, because what happened when the going really got tough in the NBA playoffs? Well, okay, that was enough to get them to change. Why wasn't the 48th straight game of the lineup being bad not enough? Because DeLon Wright played 230 minutes in the regular season. That guy had 20% of the responsibility in 2 different games that you could accurately call going into the game the biggest game of the year for the team. And they were games 99 and 100 of the season. Yeah. So I don't know, like I said right at the top, I don't know that the Knicks can leave this season feeling like they optimized the roster they gave their coach. I also feel like at this point, if they do bring back Thibodeau and don't add an offensive mind to his coaching staff, they are the ones doing the roster a disservice in that regard too. So lots of little tweaks to make, but I'd run this core back for the most part, Brunson, Towns included.
You brought up the coach. Knick fans are going to be focused almost exclusively, it seems like, on Tom Thibodeau. Where do you come down on the Thibodeau question?
Is the question, do the Knicks need a new coach?
Yeah.
I don't think they need a new coach. I think teams so often in sports have decided that it's better to be early than late. And that's something that we've seen both pay off and look stupid, right? How many times have you heard, well, you had this guy and he was doing great, and then for no reason they replace him. But then you hear just as often, well, they had this coach and the fans liked him, but they knew they needed someone to take them to the next level. What a smart change. So, people like to pretend that it's always one or the other. The fact of the matter is it's very situational, much like the job market for regular people. It's a lot about luck and timing and things happening and then at the right time in the right place and who and what the people can offer you in that moment at that exact time. I would say the Knicks, looking at the coaching market right now, there's really 2 guys that stand out that you think to yourself, well, if they would come coach the Knicks, on paper, that's a value proposition. It's Taylor Jenkins and Mike Malone. Taylor Jenkins, in my opinion, never got enough blame for the Grizzlies locker room being disorganized to the extent that it was. Everyone liked to make fun of Dylan Brooks and John Morant, and they liked to make fun of how the Grizzlies kind of showed their cracks as a team. Like this season, Santi Aldama and Desmond Bane just shoving each other, cursing, getting into it on the bench. Like, that's the environment that Taylor Jenkins fostered. I'm not saying he told them to fight each other. What I'm saying is this is a team who consistently had its players get clowned for, being out of control or immature or all these different things. Who was the adult in the room? And why are you clamoring to have him watch your kids?
Yeah.
There are crayons and you know what painted on the wall, and you walk in and you're like, Pollock might have made something out of this. Like this could be art. No. The other one is Mike Malone. Now, stop me if you've heard any of these worries about a coach before. Little old fashioned, doesn't like to play young players, especially if the front office likes them. Very in his ways, but sticks to them. And that's the point of having the job, is to have your own biases and your own foundational beliefs and to operate based off of them. Very much somebody who actually, how about this stat for you? After the second round of the NBA playoffs were complete, there was one lineup on any of the 16 playoff teams. I'm talking about the Miami Heat. I'm talking about the play-in Warriors. I'm talking about, pun intended, I'm talking about all 16 playoff teams. There was one 5-man lineup that saw more minutes all at once than Brunson, Bridges, Hart, Anunoby, and Towns. And it was Murray, Brown, Porter, Jokic, Gordon. So if there's one guy in the NBA who rides his starters even harder than Tom Thibodeau, it's Mike Malone. If you are telling me that eating McDonald's every day for a year isn't working for you anymore, don't send me a selfie from Burger King the next day. Go to Sweet Green, switch it up, man. So like, that's I guess my point there. So looking at the coaching market, unless there is some young, strappy, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed coach out there that they've had their eye on, that they really think is ready. Maybe it's, Desagna Diop, a former NBA player, now the coach of the Westchester Knicks. Maybe it's Johnny Bryant, who was their associate head coach for years before reuniting in Cleveland with his friend from Utah, Donovan Mitchell. Maybe it's Tom Thibodeau, but with an assistant coordinator. I spoke to Ivica Zubac earlier this season about the year he was having, and something he told me that really like kind of perked my ear up was that Jeff Van Gundy is like a great coach. He's never heard the guy talk about offense besides on like the TV broadcasts. Jeff Van Gundy's role with the Clippers was to rehaul, revamp, and reimagine their defense. He changed their defensive foundations. He changed their principles, and he instilled new habits in them. He did not speak to them once about the offensive side of the floor. And so that gives you like a very much NFL football vibe. But I think Mike Brown and Terry Stotts are two names the Knicks should look at for a similar role, but the other side of the ball. The Dallas Mavericks, led by Dirk Nowitzki on the court, led by Rick Carlisle off the court, really maybe led by Mark Cuban off the court. They were a team that couldn't get over the hump. So they bring in Terry Stotts to coordinate their offense. And again, stop me if you've heard Knicks fans ask for some of these things before. Stotts came to Dallas. I was 9 or 8 years old when he got there. So this is all through the lens of reporters at the time. I do not remember this. I was not watching, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse with my notepad out talking about Stotts principles, right? But having looked back on this and reading lots of articles from the time, Stotts came in. He instilled a motion-based offense that involved player movement, ball movement, and overall just tried to optimize the talent he had on the roster instead of trying to coach it into being the talent he wishes was on the roster. And, oh yeah, they won an NBA championship, which then earned Stotts a head coaching gig where he, with a core of Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum as the second best player, which you talk about, Brunson and Mitchell wouldn't work because they're two small guards. Yeah. That's what they were working with for a decade straight. I thought the offense was good in Portland. I never thought the offense was the issue in Portland. I don't think anyone did, because everyone saw that when it got to the playoffs, they were either winning 140, 138, or they were losing, 120 to 90. I would bring in Terry Stotts and I would give him not like free reign to do whatever he wants, but control of the offense. Like he is in charge of the offense. And I would work on developing an offense that leans into things we noticed in the playoffs that were good, that we didn't really notice so much in the regular season because they didn't happen so much. Like, for example, DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, and Karl Anthony Towns. The Knicks played a lineup like that so many times in this postseason. DeLon Wright, Deuce McBride, Landry Shamet, Hart, and Towns, those all bench player plus Towns lineups were really good. Like, they were good on defense because the four guys, knowing they're out there for defense, are playing their tails off, and Towns scores every time down the other end because they have to put a center on him. And so it's like, well, why are we discovering this in game 95 of the year? Like, these are things they can build off of. On the other side of that same coin, when you're saving Towns for those lineups and Hart for those lineups, can you put Brunson out there with Bridges, Anunoby, and then maybe like Shamet and Robinson, And you do Brunson and Robinson pick and roll as the basis of the offense, but you've got Bridges and Anunoby in the corners. You've got Hart crashing. Like, there are all these different lineup combinations that they just never tried because they really felt like the starting lineup was going to start working at some point. And it took until the Eastern Conference Finals for them to even make a change. And reportedly, it took Josh Hart going to Tom Thibodeau during the Boston series and suggesting it, despite the fact that they were leading the series. So, yeah, I would bring Tom Thibodeau back because I don't see the coach out there that's going to do a better job than him at preparing the team for every game. But when it comes to directing the team on the court, I do think Tom Thibodeau could benefit from some help. And I don't mean that in a he's an old man and he needs a walker to get around type way. I mean that in he is in a sport that requires constantly being able to sprint 20 miles an hour, and we are just telling him to pack some energy bars with him. Like, it's not about an ego thing. It's not about, oh, you showed you're incapable. It's about, yeah, you've been leading this team for 5 years now. They've gotten better every single year you've been here, except one time when they regressed a little bit after
year two. Yeah.
And the reason they regret, what did they regress from? They regressed from Elfrid Payton,
right,
Reggie Bullock, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Taj Gibson. That was the starting lineup. They made the 4th seed in the East, and they regressed from that the year after because you're damn right that wasn't happening again. And then they started adding talent, and they've gotten better every year. Second round, 6 games. Second round, 7 games. Third round, 6 games. At this rate, they'll lose in the conference finals in game 7 next year if the trend continues. But again, that would be growth again, right? And still half your core would be under 30. So I do think it's tough to tell Knicks fans, hey, actually, guys, everything's all right. That stuff that frustrated you, we're going to do it all over again.
Yeah. Well, I think with Knicks fans, you have two groups where it's the one group that wants Tibbs fired because they think he's just completely incompetent and does everything wrong. And then there's the other fringe that almost defends him no matter what.
The cultists.
Yeah.
The cultists.
And it's like, but with most things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. So I certainly don't think that James Dolan, after wandering around in the wilderness, looking for coaches and changing them every other year, basically for 20 years, is now going to say to Leon Rose, hey, this guy that just took us as far into the playoffs as we've been in 25 years, get rid of that guy. I don't think that's going to happen. Yeah, I don't think that has a chance of happening in the world.
And I can tell you, I don't know how much this has been reported places, but I feel like it's been long enough that I'm comfortable speaking about it now. Like earlier in Thibodeau's tenure, when I say earlier, I mean like Cam Reddish was in the rotation earlier. If they lost a game really bad, he would be pretty late to the post-game press conference. And reporters on the beat And even though I was a student at the time, I'll include myself because I was there every other home game reporting on the team, became privy at some point to the fact that the reason that the coach was as late as he was, no one was complaining that he wasn't immediately there after the game. People would hope he's addressing the team and I don't know, maybe wiping his brow and having a Powerade, damn it. But honestly, Tibbs probably just Lipton, right? Something for the voice.
For the voice, yeah. I don't think it's helping.
The beat became privy at some point to the happenings that were occurring in a meeting room of some sort after bad losses, where Tom Thibodeau would go to said meeting room and be met by his boss, Mr. Dolan. And the two would talk about how Thibodeau coached the game, what he thinks he could have done better, if he thinks he could have done better, what went wrong. And that, like, Gordon, not to make it like too personal, but if after every time you delivered a sports flash, you got a call.
Right.
Hey, how do you think that went? I know I'd be running back and forth from the bathroom. Like I'd be, you know what I mean? Like I'd be nervous, man. I'd be nervous. And I can't say that I have heard at all any inkling of inclination that that's happened this season. This was a years ago thing, but like, it's clear that whether it was through trial by fire or whatever process, that Thibodeau has earned Dolan's trust. He went from being questioned to being trusted. And so I do think there's something to keeping Thibodeau around, but loudly acknowledging and you don't just hire the guy and tell him the next day. You tell Thibodeau, who do you know in the coaching world? Like, do you know Terry Stotts? Do you know Mike Brown? Right? They had no problem getting Thibodeau's buddy Mo Cheeks on the coaching staff coming into this season. They had lost some of their former player ability to connect between the coaching staff and the players themselves, right? Johnny Bryant going to another team. Mike Woodson left. Kenny Payne left for Louisville. Now he's with Calipari at Arkansas. Like, a lot of the guys on the Knicks bench that either played or coached at the college level or at the pro level, and who really connected and identified with the players and worked on their development. The Knicks being good is as surprising to the rest of the sports world as it is to Knicks fans, So they're getting brain drained every year. Every year you see an assistant or two disappear from the bench. Telling Tom Thibodeau, hey, you've been so good that you've lost like 6 of your key assistants now. Can we try to find you a new one? I mean, right now, Terry Stotts is with Golden State. He's on the Kenny Atkinson rehab plan. He's learning from Steve Kerr, and that's a great thing for him. Are you telling me that a title raise to associate head coach, a pay raise, which Dolan has had no problem with, wouldn't be enough to entice him to move cross country, coach the New York Knicks? I think it could be. Maybe it's not. Mike Brown, how badly does he want to get into head coaching? There was a lot of locker room drama in Sacramento at his last stop. Is he just getting too old for this? You know what? Is he someone who now wants someone like Thibodeau to deal with the drama, and he just wants to be able to install an offense? I think there are little tweaks the Knicks can make that involve keeping Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, and Tom Thibodeau and Mitchell Robinson. Maybe that's the core 8, I suppose. And there are little ways to afford it. Precious Achiuwa is making $6 million. I think Ariel Hukporti is ready to replace him as the 3rd string center. I would re-sign Precious to a minimum deal if he'd take it, but I would make Hukporti the 3rd string center. Cam Payne makes $3 million. I think Tyler Kolek is about ready to replace him as the 4th string point guard. I would bring back DeLon Wright on a minimum contract. I would bring back Landry Shamet on a minimum contract. There are little ways to help this team, though, like doing those things and adding someone like an offensive coordinator that would allow them to be better. And the sell for that is simple. It's one question. It's one sentence. It's one question. Do you feel the way I opened this show saying, I don't think they maximized what they had this season? Do you feel like the Knicks maximized what they had this season? Because if you don't, I don't know how you justify to someone like a James Dolan majorly shaking up the roster before you know what you've really got.
We got a couple minutes left here, Kris. I was interested by the fact, not just the quotes about in The Athletic about Towns' defense and his incorrect coverages, but also the timing of it. I mean, the body was not even cold yet, and those quotes were already out there about the players worried Towns didn't grasp the importance of the matter. What do you make of not just those quotes, but the timing of it as well?
I was gonna say Fred and James, man. God damn. they had this loaded, locked, ready to go. And that final buzzer hit, and they were like,
boom.
I do think that it was a nice piece. I think there were lots of tidbits in there that to me felt a little bit like, how about this? You have a group project to do, and you're in school, you have a group project to do, and you get teamed up with like two of your best friends and one kid you don't really know. And okay, the three of you guys are really close. It's not like any of you dislike the kid you don't really know. That's your teammate. It's a group of four. Give that presentation. You got to work with them. But then after, the three kids sit after the presentation at lunch together. And they know that they're friends and that they have a very easy common enemy and a very easy target in the kid they didn't really know who's not sitting there. And they can just be like, oh, it was kind of tough. He handed his part in so late. Meanwhile, one of the friends sitting there didn't fill out half of their part, and they're all just sitting there ragging on the kid that's not sitting with them. It had a little bit of that vibe to me. It had a little bit of the vibe of like Josh Hart was inattentive on defense all season, but Karl Anthony Towns has a reputation for it. So shouldn't he want to prove that reputation wrong? Shouldn't he be trying harder? Why isn't he trying harder? And I think at some point there has to come the question of, well, if you know what Towns is as a defender and you know what effort you're getting and you deem it to not be enough, then you either need to reduce his minutes or change his role or change something instead of continually getting mad at getting the same result from the same process. So I do think for the players, they were just kind of letting off steam over the course of the season. I can tell you that the Knick that I heard the most chatter about throughout the year, about the locker room being unhappy with that certain player, it was not Karl Anthony Towns. So, without just throwing guys under the bus and throwing names out there based off speculation, I will just say I heard a name all season that guys in the locker room did not find this player easy to work with this year, and it was not Karl Anthony Towns. So I do think that this is just the first scapegoat to catch some flack. I think the fallacy of a scapegoat is the implication that they deserve no blame. I think Karl Anthony Towns definitely deserves some blame for his defensive miscues this season. But if you're ignoring Josh Hart's, if you're ignoring the times he was back cut, if you're ignoring the times that elite all-NBA defender OG Anunoby was made to look silly against the Indiana Pacers, sure, it's all on Karl Anthony Towns. But I do think that the other guys on the team know what they see in the mirror, and that it's just a little easier for them to say it was, the Saudi defense, some other dude did it. It's the oldest trick in the book.
Kris, great stuff, man. I appreciate it so much, and I'm sure we'll be talking again. I don't know if it's going to be as explosive an offseason for the Knicks as it was last year, but the Knicks always keep it interesting. So thanks for a few minutes.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation. And yeah, I don't know that they'll trade for two all-star caliber players, but this offseason, you could see a coaching change. You could see a head coaching change. You could see, like I was suggesting, an addition of an associate head coach or a coordinator. There are plenty of ways that the Knicks can come into next season. What's the Kobe quote? A different animal, but the same beast. And I do think that there's something to that for them. Again, and I know I'm 23, so this is another thing that I just don't really actually remember, but I've read a lot about. If Twitter existed, if TikTok existed after year one of Coughlin and Eli,
the content would have been off the charts.
That would have been over right then. Yeah. Coughlin would have had a new job. I don't know if it would have been bagging groceries or down in Jackson. He would have had a new job. So continuity, maybe not the worst. Look at the teams that made it. Thank you, Gordon, for the time.
All right, so looking ahead for the Knicks, couple of things that jump out to me. The first is the big name that Knicks fans are going to be screaming for. Every team is going to be screaming for, and that's Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's going to be the focus of the offseason because the NBA offseason is powered by big names, big stars, and it does seem at least plausible that Milwaukee reads where they're at after another first-round exit in the playoffs and says, hey, look, we won a title. That was a few years ago now. The whole Dame Lillard situation, we're not going to be competing at the top of the conference again. We've kind of topped out with this group, and it's time for a rebuild. And they should be proactive. I've said this in a previous episode that they should be looking to see, okay, let's move Giannis early rather than late. He's a guy that lives on athleticism. That's probably not going to age well, so it's better to be early than late on a trade for that guy. It's easy for me to say that. And look, with the Eastern Conference being as wide open as it is, maybe Milwaukee says, let's run it back for another year. But I think that they would be smart to be proactive when it comes to the Giannis situation. So that is possible. And Giannis does apparently love New York, or at least there's reports out there he loves New York. I don't know that means he wants to play for the Knicks. He just might like the big city. So look, every time you open Twitter this offseason, you're probably going to see a Photoshop of Giannis wearing a Knicks jersey. But yeah, I don't think that that's going to happen, mainly because if you're Milwaukee and you trade Giannis, you are screaming from the rooftops that you're rebuilding. You're not retooling. You're starting from scratch, and you really have no interest in ready-made NBA players who are in their prime right now. You want young players who have a high ceiling, and mostly you want future assets. You are starting from scratch once again. And that is not the Knicks right now. The Knicks do not have a ton of young players and picks ready to be traded. That's what they had last offseason. They have a few picks left, but they unloaded them for Mikal Bridges. So you would have to have a scenario, I think, where Giannis went to the Bucks and not only says, I want out, but I only want to go to New York. And even then, he has no real bargaining power. He's not a free agent. And plus, he just doesn't seem like that kind of guy. That's not his brand. So I get the AI photos of Giannis crowd surfing on 7th Avenue are going to be phenomenal, I'm sure. But I give that basically next to a zero chance of happening. All right, so then the number two thing that jumps out to me already, the quotes that I brought up to Kris in that article from The Athletic about Karl Anthony Towns' defense. In case you've not seen them, they were, quote, behind the scenes, the players and coaches expressed frustration with Towns' defensive habits, less concerned with his talent level and more with his process on that end. Too often, Towns executed incorrect coverages without communicating why he did it. And after that became a theme, players worried Towns didn't grasp the importance of the matter. So that quote hitting an article basically as the Knicks playoff body was not even cold yet. That's not just media time. That was somebody inside the organization getting their version of the story out first. That is somebody with access, and to me, someone with an agenda to make sure that the blame gets pointed directly in one direction, and that would be Karl Anthony Towns. I don't know. I don't think you need to have a decoder ring to figure out and be able to read between the lines there. They're saying, hey, we brought in Towns, and he did not come up big. He and that's on him. That's not on us. He didn't fit. He didn't deliver, whatever. He's not really built for this. Whatever you want to say, they are clearly pointing the finger at Karl Anthony Towns. And the timing of it, those quotes would be attention grabbing in the middle of the offseason. The fact that it hit the internet as the final seconds were ticking away, it seemed like, on the Knicks season is very interesting. Now, I don't think Towns is going anywhere. But again, that's mainly because of his contract, and any trade with him would be like the one that brought him here. It would be one problem for another problem because of his contract, much like when the Knicks moved off of Julius Randle to bring Cat to New York. So if you wanted to bring up the core guys of somebody who could get moved, I guess Josh Hart's name is going to come up if you had to pick someone. The other one that I would not be stunned by completely would be Mikal Bridges. And that's just for one reason. Now, I don't expect it, but if you're telling me I got to pick one of the core guys to pivot in another direction, it's because he's eligible for a contract. And you could have him play out the year, but the Knicks have been in the practice of extending players at that time or trading them when they have the final year of the contract. I think that's what happened with Randle, I'm pretty sure. So look, they're never going to recoup the 5 first-round picks they gave up to him, But let's be honest, he was not the lockdown defender that we thought that we were getting. And with the maneuverability of the current roster going to get harder as these things go along, the more money you have on that cap, trying to avoid the second apron, that's one name that I guess I would kind of keep an eye on out of the main parts of this roster. Now, I think that they're probably going to tweak and pivot and build out the roster with smaller moves, but Leon Rose has not been shy about making the big move when it presents itself. At this time last year, I don't think we expected Karl Anthony Towns or Mikal Bridges at that point. And look, Leon Rose should not shy away from making the big move if he has a conviction in whatever move that is. Because after the moves they made last year, this year, the goal was Eastern Conference Finals at a minimum. Now, they reached that, but they didn't exceed that. And the problem with expectations when you've put this much into it and you're this far along, the bar only gets raised for next year. Next year, just simply making the Eastern Conference Finals and losing will not be acceptable, and there will have to be major changes at that point. All right, that's going to do it for another episode. If you've not already, please hit that subscribe button. We will be back later this week with another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports.